Smooth 98.1. This is Freshly Pressed. We're looking at the news stories making the headlines across the country. And it's interactive. Would love to get your thoughts as the headlines go on with the analyst. I'll let you know how you can be a part of it. The WhatsApp number is 0809 4440981. You can also tweet at smooth981. Now, don't forget the hashtag is freshly pressed 981. We're also streaming live on our YouTube, so you can catch the live stream and you can also post a comment on there as well. It's Smooth 981. And don't forget to subscribe. The analyst is in this morning. It's Chibuzor. Good morning, Chibuzor, and welcome.
Zibby, good morning, Lagos. It's a wet Tuesday, but it's what it is.
These are the times. I wish it was raining in December. We would be worried a bit.
Well, we would be, but there's nothing next to me.
All right, let's start off with our first headline. And this one comes from Punch. Lagbaja promises timely resolution of insecurity issues.
So this is Lieutenant General Tar. This is Lieutenant General Tar Lagbaja, not the musician, the Chief of Army Staff. And he's basically speaking at an event, and he is telling Nigerians that the Army headquarters or the Nigerian Army in general is committed to ensuring security for Nigerian citizens. And yeah, he's saying it as it is. That is the entire purpose of the Nigerian Army's existence, to be truthful, to protect Nigerian sovereignty, to protect every citizens of Nigeria within its borders, and to give us that sense of security. Obviously, we faced a lot of challenges security-wise over the last, seriously, over the last 15, 20 years or more. I think since about, over 20 years now, we've been dealing with one form of insurgency or the other across the country, in one form or the other. And the army itself has been called into a lot of these places to try and restore some sense of security across these different points of the country. I think some of the challenges, obviously, is that like a lot of people tend to say, the army is quite stretched. Parts of the north, they are busy with Boko Haram and whatever form of insurgencies that are happening down there. And the southeast, you have the IPO band, other forms of insurgents or terrorists or whatever we would label them as in this instance. And you have pockets of this violence, even smaller situations, even down parts of the southwest or the south, where the army is involved in. Unfortunately, for Nigeria's situation, there are instances where in normal circumstances, other the police specifically, or even the custom services in terms of border services and the police in terms of within the civilian population should be dealing with. But because of over time, those forces are either undermanned, and do not have the capability to deal with those situations. The army has been pushed also to be able to try to take care of the situation. So rightly or wrongly, the Nigerian army is quite stretched. He was speaking at an event, and one of the things that this didn't come out so strongly in the story, but I think there was another comment by a speaker at the same event, who was the executive director of the Specs Academy, Professor Ikechukwu, who talked about how some of the population are unwilling to share information with the army, and despite the significant actions, due to some of the maybe some negative actions of the army and some misconstrued actions. And he's pleaded with Lieutenant General Lagbaja to try and sort out these issues. And this for me is, while I'm mentioning it, for me, this is core of some of the things. Because of the nature of the the general army officers training, there are particular things that there are particular decisions that they will take that might come across as being strange to the general populace. But what we do need, and this might become misconstrued a lot of times and affect the trust that the average citizen will have with the army official. And one of the concerns about having to stretch the Nigerian army across various incidents and situations across the country is that they're actually having to deal with things over an extended period with the population, which they're not trained to deal with in most instances. One of the things I would like to see a lot more from the army is probably training and retraining their officers down to across every cadre about the army's or the army officers' responsibility to the population. Because of our previous experiences under the military, look, there's been a lot of carryovers and hangovers. Don't forget that while not all the officers who are in the army today, all the soldiers in the army today were born in time of during the military regimes, a lot of them have had the hangovers of having to take some of the culture. And I have personally had to witness some behavior that, for me was not the best that I've seen from Nigerian army. So I would like to see a lot of retraining on how to engage properly with the civilian populace, understanding their role. And I think over time, we might be able to correct that relationship and improve on it. But for the army to make any pro improve progress, like the head of the army, the chief of army staff has said, they would need a lot of cooperation from the population to be able to do that. So I do call on Nigerians to join hands with Nigerian army to do it, because really, in truth of it, we don't have any other option than to do this. It's not like it's a multiple choice question.
Now, from the perspective of the citizens, and this is not just with the army, we've seen it with the police as well. There's a lack of trust. What do citizens need to see the army do to actually trust them more?
I think citizens would just like to see the army keep doing the work that they expected to do, which they will do a lot of. Unfortunately, most of what they're doing is out of sight of the citizens. I think one of that, well, at least most of us, apart from those who are on the front lines or close to the front lines, who would actually see and directly feel the impact. And we do thank the Nigerian army officers for their sacrifice for the nation. But one other thing I would like to say, like I do think, and I hold that to the army headquarters, a lot of training and retraining. I've seen a lot. Majority of the army officers in Nigerian army are beautiful, are wonderful officers. The challenge is how, for the few that are there, how do you deal with the civilian population? The relationship between the army and the civilian population would actually build trust if you have the right form of relationships where both sides are as much as possible can engage one another as much as possible openly, and we can see both sides of both parties can see both sides of the coin, for lack of a better term. I think what I've seen in some instances where, because of where they've been deployed, for instance, there's been a lot of misuse or misconstrued misuse of army officers. Or even like you said, in fact, army of you, it's even better in the military, in the in the forces like the police. Unfortunately, a lot of people have had experiences where they've either had, if you go online and you go on Twitter, and if you have personal experiences where you probably had funny incident with the police, as from as small as random checkpoints where they just want to obtain money from you, to where you actually set up by these officers, to actually even the way they discuss and engage.
Mm.
Because it's that understanding that at best, treat every human being the way you want to be treated. So it's not even about any form of subservience or any, officer to human being to human being. Let's treat ourselves with respect. The only difference is that you have the uniform, you have the training, and you have the gun. And if you choose to use it wrongly at any period of time, you can end the other person's life. But you should be aware of that responsibility. It shouldn't be misused as power. It should be used as responsibility. And I think a lot of the Nigerian officers or army officers, and even the police that we speak, a lot of them do try to be aware of that and act within that space.
Mm. Now, just I think it might have been about 2 weeks ago, the Minister of State for Defense had commissioned some videos. It was supposed to be some sort of PSA, and it was recorded in three different languages, Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, just basically showing that, the armed forces are regular men and women with families. And I thought it was a brilliant idea. I don't know how far that has gone, but I saw it on social media, and it definitely made me want to thank a soldier. Hashtag.
Yeah, I think it's the right step to do. Let's humanize as much as we can these guys who are putting their lives on the line in the front lines, because for a lot of them, they want to see the country in the best possible form that it should be.
All right. Well, let us know your thoughts. The WhatsApp number is 0809 444 981. And you can also tweet at Smooth981. If you're watching the live stream, you can also post a comment on there. It is Smooth981 on YouTube. Let's move on to the next headline. And this one comes from Punch. Don't transmit minimum wage. Don't transmit minimum wage bill without negotiation. Labour tells Tinubu.
So the Labour leadership is well, the word that's being used in the article here is urging, but they're basically they're urging, they're asking the president not to consider consultation and reaching an agreement with leadership. That's the organized labor is basically asking the president to reach some level of to have some level of engagement and reach conclusion. So we want to agree on this number that you want to pay us before you now push it or transmit it to the as a proposed bill to the House of Assembly. And rightly so. If we've in the last few months we've had strikes, we've had warning of strikes, we have impending strikes. When I say 2 months, I think I'm very, very nice because this is I'll say a few months this year because we've been having this from even preceding this government. But we obviously with the increased pressures on the Nigerian citizen and Nigerian worker in this current economic climate, we've had additional pressure to review the salaries, to review takeover, and even offer palliatives for workers. We're back on the salary issue. We've had the strikes issues. The Labour has come out and said, but this is what we're looking for. And the presidents and the executive have come out, this is what we can offer. So obviously what we expect or what anybody expects is that they're able to come to some middle ground and have an agreement. And once the agreement sails through, everybody knows we're on the same page and we can now transmit that as a bill and get it passed by the House and everybody is hunky-dory and we're all fine and we can go back and live our best lives. So that's what they expect. That's what they're asking the president to do. On the I think it was on June 12th, the president did announce that there was some consensus that had been reached between themselves and Labour quickly debunked that they weren't aware of any consensus, that they had made their proposals, the presidency had made its own proposal, and they are still waiting for additional engagement. And they're expressing disappointment that that they've not gotten the engagement they require, but they feel that things are moving on within the presidency and within the executive and the legislature to pass this bill that appears to reflect what they need and what has been agreed and where there has not been any agreement. So I think that it's just being fair. With every two parties in an agreement, you need to agree something. If not, then there was no point for the discussions in the first place.
All right, let's look at some messages coming through. This one is from Ajayi. He says, I sympathize with the Chief of Army Staff in his efforts to tackle the security challenge in the country. But the truth of the matter is that internal security is not the job of the army. The army cannot police every community in the country, and it's the security vacuum at the grassroots that is the main cause of the matter. Let us begin with the establishment of police at the community, local and state levels. You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Stay with us. More headlines and, of course, more of your thoughts.
Interesting that we equate security to police. I think it's a bit of a miss.
Okay.
I think why we need more policing or why we need more police or people that security-wise, it's not about, we need more numbers, yes, but it's about what you do, how basic things, how the streets lit up, how the streets design.
Absolutely.
Do you have dark spots? Do you have places that people feel safe?
That is true.
What needs to cover the criminality to do something?
That's true. You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1 0809 444 981. That's the number to send your messages to. We love to get your thoughts. WhatsApp number again 0809 444 981. You can also tweet at Smooth981. We're also streaming live on our YouTube channel, Smooth981. And you can even post a comment on there. The analyst this morning is Chibuzor. Let's move on to Vanguard. That is the next headline. And this one says, Nigeria has 40.2 million agriculture households, and these stats come from the NBS.
So the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, the NBS, performed or basically unveiled a report, basically, which speaks to the National Agricultural Sample Census, which they performed in 2022 in Abuja. They revealed it yesterday in Abuja. And basically, we're able to reel out a set of statistics that are interesting to see. And, if used, could actually, depends on how we want to use it, can actually help us drive and look at some of the challenges we are facing in terms of food security today. So basically, the focus, what they are talking about here is that we have 40.2 million agricultural households, which is which follows trend in Nigeria. Um, and he said they said that 91% of the agricultural households cultivated crops. Most of them were only involved in 35% were involved only in crop cultivation, 48% reported raising livestock. The highest point, the state with the largest crop production was in Ebonyi, and the one with the least was in Lagos. And obviously, there are no prizes for why that is. He also talked about how 16% of households raised 58 million cattle, which is quite interesting. Um, because if my understanding is that this is actually looking at households and not commercial raising of agriculture. So if you talk about 16% of households raising 58 million cattle. Interesting number. 41.2% raised about 124 million goods. 42.5 raised poultry. So this is basically statistical value. So for those who like numbers, please check it out on the NBS website or the Vanguard newspapers. Obviously, livestock production was more in the north. We have in Jigawa, the highest livestock being in Jigawa, production being in Jigawa and Bauchi State, and poultry was fine in Benue and Ebonyi State. Well.
Okay, let's look at some of the.
I'm really looking for anything that is. I'm trying not to over technicalize to make this too technical because a lot of it is about the numbers that have been gathered in.
It's a lot of numbers.
Largely, census activities about the numbers generated. The more important part of census is how do you utilize those numbers to make decisions? What direction do you want to go with these numbers? Do you, for instance, if you are looking at the number of poultry being produced in parts of the country, are we increasing our spend on trying to either grow it or reduce it, or are we to even support those things within those spaces? So I'm interested to see how the various state governments actually look at this data, if they look at this data and see how do they use it to utilize them, and also the local government, because now we're also asking them to take more responsibility. So we do expect the various arms of government to look at this data. It's not enough that the NBS is doing a lot of this work. It's how do we utilize the data to make Nigeria better, especially in these times where we've been complaining a lot about food security. So yes, for those who like the numbers, hit the NBS website and look at this in detail. And those who are in that sector for agriculture, it might also open up doors for you. But this is speaking to a lot of the household activities in terms of poultry and grain crops.
Are we going to see these numbers increase?
I'm not so it's a bit interesting. So if you take in if obviously you have a lot more security, then you see a lot more settled households, especially in parts of the north and in parts of the east. If you see less of the rural to urban migration, you see a lot more, especially now that there's a lot of pressure and people actually going. So I do know the president is trying, and the president's wife are trying to kicked off a program. I think a garden in every home. A lot of the states are talking about people building up gardens. So if you go in that direction, in theory, you should see an increase. But for people to be able to take part in activities such as this, they need to be, you can't say a migration of, for instance, young able-bodied youth from maybe parts of the north who were previously on the farm, the middle belt, coming down to Lagos and expecting that this would increase because once they leave there, who's going to tend to those states? So we do need to get some level of stability across the nation where people can actually feel safe at their homes and continue with the activities they used to do from time, or even people expand upon them over time. So that's what we need to see. So, like I said, those who need to look at these numbers need to look at these numbers and see, how does it interest me? How can I take advantage of it to go or improve my areas of responsibility?
All right, thank you, Chibuzor. Let's look at a few messages coming through. Sam from Ikeja says, citizens should respect our armed forces, including the police, in spite of their shortfalls. You can't have some miscreants killing army officers and there won't be reaction somehow. A lot is done behind the scenes by our armed forces. They also have family members, friends, church members, mosque members, etc., who are civilians, so they know how to relate to civilians. But they have been brought out to attend to civil matters instead of the police. Cisco Delgado says every community should be seriously involved in security matters as far as the present security situation in Nigeria is concerned. In my hometown, age groups and organizations are involved in putting security cameras all over the community, and I'm among the engineers doing the networking of these cameras, where there should be a central network operations center for monitoring. Another message coming through. Oh, wow. It's not okay. Well, that is noted. Thank you. Can't see a name there, but thanks for the information. Let's move on to Daily Trust. Herders reject Senate's bill on ranching.
Okay. This is a topical issue that has obviously taken a lot of our time, and it's quite important in a lot of the discussions in terms of security, in terms of both actual security of lives and property, and also food security in terms of like both growing plants of agriculture, growing crops, and also in terms of raising animals. So the Senate has gotten to some point in trying to push a bill to basically support ranching or support ranching, and it's been rejected by pastoralists, by supposedly rejected by pastoralists. The bill actually has killed the second reading, and and it was sponsored by Senator Titus Zam of Benue North West. So the aim of it is that establishing ranches for herders in their states of origin, and it has proposed a jail term and a 50,000 fine for defaulters. So the major provisions that were seen as by pastoralists as the major issue and an onslaught on their livelihood is that herders should be relocated to their states of origin. Um, there is also that anybody who contravenes the provisions of the law shall be liable to a conviction or to a fine of 5 years or fine of 50,000 naira or imprisonment of 5 years or both actually. And there's actually a list of actions that might be seen as actually going against the provisions of this bill, so which would affect pastoralists quite negatively. They ask that basically a lot of details around it, about ownership of the ranches, how improvements to the ranches, so basically what the pastoralists are, movement of the cattle from one ranch to the other shall not be by any means, shall be by, so basically you cannot keep doing what you're doing now, which is just taking those cows and moving from point to point. When you're moving them from ranch to ranch, you need to put them in some vehicle and transport them. So I look at this bill in two ways. I say the cause of concern in two ways. My viewpoint has always been that ranching is a business and the owners of cattle need to invest into this business. And when I say the owners of cattle is expensive. I do not believe that a lot of the people that we see leading the cattle across the various routes own those cattle based on the prices at which some of these things go for. So the owners need to make some investment into that process and treat it like a business that it ought, as in treat it like a very detailed business, which it is. And once you do that, you can also look at how do I increase or maximize my profit. So you know that every time you invested into it, you have to maximize and optimize it. At the moment, what a lot of the discussions about this bill and a lot of discussions around the bill or bills are relating to this have been due to the fact that individuals there's, in my view, for some people, a sense of entitlement about who should pay for the ranches, who should pay for the service around the ranches. We want to keep on with our low cost model where we have the cows, you take them from point to point across the state, across state lines, where they can eat grass everywhere they want to eat, and including people's farms, and get into all these clashes, communal clashes that we've had over time. And both the farmers are forced to protect themselves, the ranchers are forced to protect themselves, and it just falls into chaos. We need to get to a point where there's some level of organization and we can now reap other benefits from having cattle, apart from just having meat at rates at the price at which we are getting them. We can have a lot more from the cattle, and we can have industries that are built around this thing. It's just we need to, while I like to keep tradition and culture, we also need to find a midline. And Nigeria is not the only one facing this challenge. You have the same challenge in Kenya, you have the same challenge in Ghana, and they are moving forward with workable solutions. We keep getting caught up in this same trap in Nigeria where there's a lot of sentiment about what to do moving forward on both sides. So, both the guys who want to stop it and people who want to continue, there's a lot more sentiment. And we need to come to the middle point where we actually look at the facts and say, you know what, this is what we need to do because in 20 years' time, this is the Nigeria we want to live.
Now, I'm curious about this. So, if a farmer walked into his farm and saw someone harvesting his crops, someone he didn't know, that would be regarded as stealing. It would be a criminal offense.
Yeah.
Why is it sort of different to, put this tag on, these animals and the herders basically doing the same, but with animals? Why is it different?
So in Nigeria, there's a lot of things that we tend to deal with, both political and sentimental. So you describe the right scenario where you treat it in the way it is. And I know in Ghana they went to the extremes of even if the police found the cattle moving around the park, they were slaughtering them basically.
Mm.
But because of where we were in Nigeria, we try to treat these issues with some level of delicacy and try and balance the interests of both sides. And while there's a place for that, we get stuck in inaction when we try to do this a lot. So I do think that we need to get to some point of agreement where, we work towards the ideal over a period of time. It's not something that will happen overnight. We need to work towards that. But we need to make those agreements where guys who own cattle, like the people who own poultry, who invest into building pens and all for their to keep their poultry and how they take care of their eggs and all that, need to do the same thing for their cattle. I think the only one point I wanted to raise, which I have against the law, is the fact that there is some law to ask that the pastoralists need to go back to their state of
Right.
origin. I have a big problem with that.
That comes across as a bit
Yeah,
discriminatory or xenophobic.
I think it's a bit. If you set up a ranch, for instance, if a state chooses to set up a ranch, or an individual chooses to set up a ranch, he can do it as a business. If this guy is from Gombe and wants to have his, and there's a ranch in Lagos where he can access, let's so it be it. He doesn't need to walk that cattle back from Lagos to Gombe. And even if it's Benue and somebody say, I want a ranch in my hood, like, pay the price or use the service. So let's remove all this talk about back to your state of origin and things like that. I think we should have gone past that in Nigeria. Unfortunately, we're still stuck in stuff like that, even for our national passport submissions.
All right, let's look at some messages coming through. This is from Oluwaseyi. Oluwaseyi says the army don't consider themselves ordinary Nigerians. You'll understand better if the area you live in or your village for any reason had to be placed under the protection because of a communal crisis or any other issues. I know this all too well. You can ask those whose villages and areas are presently under their protection. The people in the Niger Delta, like many areas of Delta State, have had to live under them for many reasons. Since the 90s, they can give you tales for days. They consider themselves higher beings. Every Nigerian is in Oluwaseyi's word, bloody civilian. The high-handedness is up there, just like those of the Nigerian police. The Nigerian Navy, and especially the Air Force, are better in their relationships with Nigerians, mostly because we hardly see them everywhere and because they are better trained. This is the fallout from the military era. The army chief will have to do more, like train them better and teach them to treat Nigerians better. Just talk will not change habits that have become tradition to them. Dan Okuda says it's very clear that the northern governors are not serious in tackling the insecurity in the region. Talking without taking concrete action can never solve the problem. Damilola says Government investing in ranching by loans, grants, subsidies is normal and should be encouraged. That is the job of the government, and it's done globally. Aisha says people could establish common ranches in different locations of states so everyone pays to access the facilities and services. I'll take one more message. The only reason someone will insist on a system that's archaic, less productive, and problematic is when an underlying purpose seems to be working. Truth be told, there might be some sort of agenda to be checkmated before it runs into a conflagration. That's the open grazing story. That is all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for your conversation, by your messages, and very special thanks to you, Chibuzor, our analyst, for being on the show with us this morning.
My pleasure.
Please stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast, the Grapevine from 8:15.
Nigerians and Nigeria.
Thanks, Chibuzor.